Mark chapter 5. A man with evil spirit. Jesus and his disciples crossed Lake Galilee and came to shore near the town of Gerasa. When he was getting out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit quickly ran to him from the graveyard where he had been living. No one was able to tie the man up anymore, not even with a chain. He had often been put in chains and irons, but he broke the chains and smashed the leg irons. No one could control him. Night and day he was in the graveyard or on a hills, yelling and cutting himself with stones. When the man saw Jesus in the distance, he ran up to him and knelt down. He shouted, "Jesus, Son of God in heaven, what do you want with me? Promise me in God's name that you won't torture me." The man said this because Jesus had already told the evil spirit to come out of him. Jesus asked, "What's your name?" The man answered, "My name is Rach, because I was lots of evil spirits." He then begged Jesus not to send them away. Over on the hillside, a large herd of pigs are feeding. So the evil spirit begged Jesus, "Send us into those pigs. Let us go into them." Jesus let them go, and they went out of the man and into the pigs. The whole herd of about 2,000 pigs rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. The man taking care of the pigs ran to the town and the farms to spread the news. Then the people came out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had once been full of demons. He was sitting there with his clothes on and in his right mind. They were terrified. Everyone who had seen what had happened told about the man and the pigs. Then the people started begging Jesus to leave their part of the country. When Jesus was getting into the boat, the man begged to go with him, but Jesus wouldn't let him. Instead, he said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how good he has been to you." The man went away into the region near the 10 cities known as Decapolis and began telling everyone how much Jesus had done for him. Everyone who heard what had happened was amazed. A dying girl and sick woman. Once again, Jesus got into the boat and crossed Lake Galilee. Then as he stood on the shore, a large crowd gathered around him. The person in charge of the synagogue was also there. His name was Jairus, and when he saw Jesus, he went over to him. He knelt at Jesus' feet and started begging him for help. He said, "My little daughter is about to die. Please come and touch her so she will get well and live." Jesus went with Jairus. Many people followed along and kept crowding around. In the crowd was a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had gone to many doctors They had not done anything except cause her a lot of pain. She had paid them all the money she had, but instead of getting better, she only got worse. The woman had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him in the crowd and barely touched his clothes. She had said to herself, "If I can just touch his clothes, I will be healed." As soon as she touched them, her bleeding stopped and she knew she was healed. At the moment, Jesus felt power go out from him. He turned to the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "Look at all these people crowding around you. How can you ask who touched you?" But Jesus turned to see who had touched him. The woman knew what had happened to her, so she came trembling with fear and knelt down in front of Jesus. Then she told him the whole story. Jesus said to the woman, "You are now well because of your faith. May God give you peace. You are healed and you will no longer be in pain." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from Jairus' home and said, "Your daughter has died. My brother, the teacher, anymore? My brother, the teacher anymore? Why bother the teacher anymore?" Jesus heard what they say, and he said to Jairus, "Don't worry, just have faith." Jesus didn't let anyone go with him except Peter and the two brothers, James and John. They went home with Jairus and saw the people crying and making a lot of noise. Then Jesus went inside and said to them, "Why are you crying and carrying on like this? The child isn't dead, she's just asleep." But the people laughed at him. After Jesus had sent them all out of the house, he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples and went to where she was. He took the 12-year-old girl by the hand and said, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." The girl got right up and started walking around. Everyone was greatly surprised, but Jesus ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Then he said, "Give her something to eat." Mark chapter 6. The people of Nazareth turned against Jesus. Jesus left and returned to his hometown with his disciples. The next Sabbath, he taught in the synagogue. Many of the people who heard him were amazed and asked, "How can he do all this? Where did he get such wisdom and power to work these miracles? Isn't he the carpenter, the son of Mary? Aren't James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon his brothers? Don't his sisters still live here in our town?" The people were upset because of what he was doing. But Jesus said, "Prophets are honored by everyone except the people of their hometown and their relatives and their own family." Jesus couldn't work any miracles there except to heal a few sick people by placing his hands on them. He was surprised that the people didn't have any faith. Instructions for the 12 apostles. Jesus started in all the neighboring villages. Then he called together his 12 apostles and sent them out by two with power over evil spirit. He told them, "You may take along a walking stick, but don't carry food or a traveling bag or any money. It's all right to wear sandals, but don't take along a change of clothes. When you're welcomed into a home, stay there until you leave that town. If any place won't welcome you or listen to your message, leave and shake the dust from your feet as a warning to them." The pastors left and started telling everyone to turn to God. They forced out many demons and healed a lot of sick people by putting olive oil on them. The death of John the Baptist. Jesus became so well known that Herod the ruler heard about him. Some people thought he was John the Baptist, who had come back to life with the power to work miracles. Others thought he was Elijah or some other prophet who had lived long ago. But when Herod heard about Jesus, he said, "This must be John. I had his head cut off, and now he has come back to life." Herod had earlier married Herodias, a wife of his brother Philip, but John had told him, "It isn't right for you to take your brother's wife." So in order to please Herodias, Herod arrested John and put him in prison. Herodias had a grudge against John and wanted to kill him, but she couldn't do it because Herod was afraid of John and protected him. He knew that John was a good and a holy man. Even though Herod was confused by what John said, he was glad to listen to him, and he often did. Finally, Herodias got her chance when Herod gave a great birthday celebration for himself and invited his officers, his army officers, and the leaders of Galilee. The daughter of Herodias came in and danced for Herod and his guests. She pleased them so much that Herod said, "Ask for anything and it's yours. I swear that I will give you as much as half of my kingdom if you want it." The girl laughed and asked her mother, "What do you think I should ask for?" Her mother answered, "The head of John the Baptist." The girl hurried back and told Herod, "Here and now on a serving plate, I want a head of John the Baptist." Herod was very sorry for what he had said, but he didn't want to break the promise he had made in front of his guests. At once he ordered the guard to cut off John's head there in prison. The guard put the head on a serving plate and took it to the girl. Then she gave it to her mother. When John's followers learned that he had been killed, they took his body and put it in the tomb. Jesus feeds 5,000. After the apostles returned to Jesus, they told him everything they had done and thought. But so many people were coming and going that Jesus and the apostles didn't even have a chance to eat. Then Jesus said, "Let's go to a place where we can be alone and get some rest." They left in boat for a place where they could be alone. But many people saw them leave and figured out where they were going. So people from every town ran on ahead and got there first. When Jesus got out of the boat, he saw the large crowd that was like a sheep without a shepherd. He felt sorry for the people and started teaching them many things. That evening, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "This place is like a desert and it's already late. Let the crowds leave so they can go to the farms and villages near here and buy something to eat." Jesus replied, "You give them something to eat." But they asked him, "Don't you know it'll take almost a year's wages to buy all these people something to eat?" Then Jesus said, "How much bread do you have? Go and see." They found out and answered, "We have 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish." Jesus told his disciples to tell the people to sit down on the green grass. They sat down in groups of 100 and groups of 50. Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He looked up toward the heaven and blessed the food. Then he broke the bread and handed it to his disciples to give to the people. He also divided the 2 fish, so everyone could have some. After everyone had eaten all they wanted, Jesus' disciples picked up 12 large baskets of leftover bread and fish. There was 5,000 men who ate the food. Jesus walks on the water. At once, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and start back across the Bethsaida side. But he stayed until he had sent the crowds away. Then he told them goodbye and went up on the side of the mountain to pray. Later, in the evening, he was still there by himself, and the boat was somewhere in the middle of the lake. He could see that the disciples were struggling hard because they were rowing against the wind. Not long before morning, Jesus came toward him. He was walking on the water and was about to pass the boat. When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they thought he was a ghost and he started screaming. All of them saw him and were terrified, but at the same time he said, "Don't worry, I am Jesus, don't be afraid." He then got into the boat with them, and he wind died down. The disciples were completely confused. Their minds were closed, and they couldn't understand the true meaning of the loaves of bread. Jesus heals sick people and Gennesaret. Jesus and his disciples crossed the lake and brought the boat to shore near the town of Gennesaret. As soon as they got out of the boat, the people recognized Jesus. So they ran all over that part of the country to bring their sick people to him on mats. They brought each time they heard where he was. In every village or farm or marketplace where Jesus went, the people brought their sick to him. They begged him to let them just touch his clothes, and everyone who did was healed. Mark chapter 7. The teaching of the ancestors. Some Pharisees and several teachers of the law of Moses from Jerusalem came and gathered around Jesus. They noticed that some of his disciples ate without first washing their hands. The Pharisees and many others obeyed the teachings of their ancestors. They always washed their hands in the proper way before eating. None of them will eat anything they buy in the market until it is washed. They also follow a lot of other teachings, such as washing cups, pitchers, and bowls. The Pharisees and teachers asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples obey what our ancestors taught us to do? Why do they eat without washing their hands?" Jesus replied, "You're nothing but show-offs. The prophet Isaiah was right when he wrote that God had said, 'Or praise me with your words, but you never really think about me. It is unless for you to worship me. When you teach rules made by humans, you disobey God's commands in order to obey what humans have taught. You're good at rejecting God's commands so that you can follow your own teachings. Didn't Moses command you to respect your father and mother? Didn't he tell you to put to death all who curse their parents? But you let people get by without helping their parents when they should. You let them say that what they own has been offered to God. You won't let those people help their parents, and you ignore God's commands in order to follow your own teaching. You do a lot of other things just as that. What really makes people unclean? Jesus called the crowd together again and said, "Pay attention and try to understand what I mean. The food that you put into your mouth doesn't make you unclean and unfit to worship God. The bad words that come out of your mouth are what make you unclean." After Jesus and his disciples had left the crowds and gone into the house, they asked him what this saying meant. He answered, "Don't you know what I'm talking about by now? You surely know that the food you put into your mouth cannot make you unclean. It doesn't go into your heart, but into your stomach, and then out of your body. By saying this, Jesus meant that all food will fit it. Then Jesus said, "It comes from your heart is what makes you unclean. Out of your heart come evil thoughts, vulgar deeds, stealing, murder, unfaithfulness in marriage, greed, meanness, deceit, indecency, envy, insult, pride, and foolishness. All of these come from your heart, and they are what make you unfit to worship God." A woman's faith. Jesus left and went to a region near the town of Tyre, where he stayed in someone's home. He didn't want people to know he was there, but they found out anyway. A woman whose daughter had an evil spirit in her heard where Jesus was, and at once she came and knelt down at his feet. The woman was Greek and had been born in the part of Syria known as Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to force the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said, "The children must first be fed. It isn't right to take away their food and feed it to dogs." The woman replied, "Lord, even puppies eat the crumbs the children drop from the table." Jesus answered, "That's true. You may go now. The demon has left your daughter." When the woman got back home, she found her child lying on the bed. The demon had gone. Jesus heals a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. Jesus left the region around Tyre and went by way of Sidon toward the Lake Galilee. He went through the land near 10 cities known as Decapolis. Some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. They begged Jesus just to watch him. After Jesus had taken him aside from the crowd, he stuck his fingers in the man's ear. Then he spit and put it on the man's tongue. Jesus looked up toward heaven, and with a groan he said, "Ephata," which means "open up." At once the man could hear, and he had no more trouble talking clearly. Jesus told the people not to say anything about what he had done. But the more he had them, the more they talked about it. They were completely amazed and said, "Everything he does is good. He even heals people who cannot hear or talk." Mark chapter 8. Jesus fed 4,000. One day, another large crowd gathered around Jesus. That they hadn't brought along anything to eat. So Jesus called his disciples together and said, "I feel sorry for these people. They have been with me for 3 days and they don't have anything to eat. Some of them live a long way from here. If I send them away hungry, they might faint on their way home. The disciples said, "The place is like a desert. Where can we find enough food to feed such a crowd?" Jesus asked them how much food they had. They replied, 7 small loaves of bread. After Jesus told the crowd to sit down, he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks. He then broke the loaves and handed them to his disciples, who passed them out of the crowds. They also had a few little fish, and after Jesus had blessed these, he told the disciples to pass them around. The crowds of about 4,000 people are all they wanted, and the leftovers filled 7 large baskets. As soon as Jesus had sent the people away, he got into the boat with the disciples and crossed the territory near Dalmanuta, a sign for heaven. The Pharisees came out and started an argument with Jesus. They wanted to test him by asking for a sign for heaven. Jesus groaned and said, "Why are you always looking for a sign? I can promise you that you will not be given one." Then he left them. He again got into the boat and crossed over to the other side of the lake, the east of Paris and of Herod. The disciples had forgotten to bring any bread, and they had only one left with them in the boat. Jesus warned them, "Watch out, guard against the east of the Pharisees and of Herod." The disciples talked this over and said to each other, "He must be saying this because we don't have any bread." Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, "Why are you talking about not having any bread? Don't you understand? Are your minds still closed? Are your eyes blind and your ears deaf? Don't you remember how many baskets of leftovers you picked up when I fed those 5,000 people with only 5 small loaves of bread?" "Yes," the disciples answered. "There were 12 baskets." Jesus then asked, "And how many baskets of leftovers did you pick up when I broke 7 small loaves of bread for those 4,000 people?" "7," they answered. "Don't you know what I am talking about by now?" Jesus asked. Jesus heals a blind man at Bethsaida. As Jesus and his disciples were going into Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to him, begged him to touch the man. Jesus took him by the hand and led him out of the village, where he spit into the man's eyes. He placed his hands on the blind man and asked him if he could see anything. The man looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking around." Once again, Jesus places his hands on the man's eyes, And this time the man stared, his eyes were healed, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus said to him, "You may return home now. I don't go into the village." Who is Jesus? Jesus and his disciples went to the village near the town of Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "What do people say about me?" The people answered, "Some say you are John the Baptist, or maybe Eliah. Others say you are one of the prophets." Then Jesus asked, "But who do you say I am?" "You're Messiah," Peter replied. Jesus warned disciples not to tell anyone about him. Jesus speaks around his suffering and death. Jesus began telling his disciples what would happen to him. He said, "The nation's leaders, the chief priests, and the teachers of law of Moses will make Son of Man suffer terribly. He will be rejected and killed, but 3 days later he will rise to life." Then Jesus explained clearly what he meant. Peter took Jesus aside and told him to stop talking like that. But when Jesus turned and saw the disciples, he corrected Peter. He said to him, "Satan, get away from me. You are thinking like everyone else and not like God." Jesus then told the crowd and the disciples to come closer, and he said, "If any of you want to be my followers, you must forget about yourself, and you must take up your cross and follow me. If you want to save your life, you will destroy it. But if you give up your life for me and for the good news, you will save it. What will you gain if you own the whole world but destroy yourself? What could you give to get back your soul? Don't be ashamed of me and my message among these unfaithful and simple people. If you are the Son of Man, will be ashamed of you when he comes in glory of his Father with the holy angels." Amen.